Well, a reporter for the Associated Press apparently not happy that our government has refused to condemn a statement by Turkey, a U.S. ally, calling Israel a terrorist state for defending itself in Gaza. Listen to the AP's Matthew Lee and State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland on Monday.
You say that it would not be helpful for you to discuss any of your conversations, that quiet diplomacy is the way to de-escalate that. Well, you've been doing your quiet diplomacy now for almost a week. How's it going so far?
We are working hard with the parties. We're working hard with
anybody that maybe less quiet might get more results? The squeaky wheel gets greased, that kind of thing?
I'll let the
You're staying silent while people are dying left and right.
Matt, we are being far from silent. The president
is telling us anything about what when the Turks come out, when the leaders of Turkey come out and say that Israel is engaged in acts of terrorism, and you refuse to say that you don't agree with that, or maybe you do agree with it, that's being silent.
Matt, we have made a decision that we need to engage in our diplomatic work diplomatically. We have been very, very clear about where we stand on this, which is that we don't practice diplomacy from the podium. We have been very clear that Israel has a right of self-defense. We've been very clear that rockets continue to be fired and land on Israel. We've been very clear that we are working to try to get this conflict de-escalated. We have been very clear about our concern for the civilians and innocents on both sides who are getting cut in this.
You won't stick up for your ally Israel when the Turks, another one of your allies, say that they're engaged in terrorism in Gaza.
We have been extremely clear about our concern for Israel's security, about the fact that Israel has a right to self-defense, but I am not going to go further than that today.
Why can't you say that you don't agree with the Turks?
Because I'm not going to get into a public spitting match with allies on either side. We're just not going to do that.
And
okay?
You think that that's worse? A public spitting match with one of your allies is worse than hundreds of people dying every day?
I don't understand the question here. There's not a question here. You're just looking for a fight. Let's go, Saeed.
No. The fight is already on. The fight's going on over there.
Absolutely.
And you guys, by refusing to say anything about what you're trying to do, or refusing to say whether you agree or disagree with comments that are being made by your allies or others, that makes things worse, not better.
We, of course, agree that rhetorical attacks against Israel are not helpful at this moment. Is that what you were looking for, Matt?
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow. Joining me now, Mark Thiessen. He's a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and Juan Williams, who's a Fox News political analyst. You don't see that every day. Victoria Nuland on her heels at State and the Associated Press going after her. Mark, what did you make of it?
Oh, I'm glad that he pushed her on it. I mean, look, you have to see what Erdogan really said. He didn't just call Israel a terrorist state. He
the Turkish Prime Minister.
He accused the Turkish Prime Minister, Erdogan. He said that Israel was engaged in ethnic cleansing, and he said, this is a quote, "Sooner or later, Israel will answer for the blood it has shed." This very morning, he gave another speech in which he urged Hamas to keep fighting and, quote, "die as men do," unquote. This is the kind of language we expect from the leaders of Iran, not from the leaders of a NATO ally. So, of course, the State Department should have, not reluctantly, but vigorously condemned those remarks. But more important than what the State Department says is what the president does. The president said during the fall campaign, "Israel, I've got your back." Well, now is his chance to show it. And one way to show it is that when the Prime Minister of Turkey is fanning the flames of war to say to the Prime Minister of Turkey, if you want to have a strong relationship with the United States, if you want our support to join the European Union, you cannot fan the flames of war and not have consequences with your relations with the United States.
Juan, she seemed to be saying, I don't want to get into a spitting match with another ally, Turkey.
That's true.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, what's striking to me is in listening to Mark and listening to Mr. Lee's comments, the AP reporter, is I think they really value the rhetoric more than the action. The action that's been taken here is to try to get Turkey to act as an intermediary along with the Egyptians, President Morsi there, to stop this and to get the Palestinians under control. This was aggravated by fire coming from Hamas towards Israel. Israel has now responded. There are 115 people dead. And as a result, you get in the Arab community, in the Muslim community, a lot of talk about the fact that this is not a fair match, that Israel is the superior military power. And as a result, they're making it out to be the case that somehow Israel is the aggressor, when in fact Hamas has been the aggressor. So I think the United States, in trying to seek long-term peace, it's not in our interest now to step in and just have empty rhetorical attacks on the Turkish or on the Egyptians. The idea is to make them work for our cause of peace.
Does it matter what we say, if we just stay silent in response to Turkey's comment?
Of course it matters what we say, and Juan, as a columnist and commentator, knows very well that what is said matters very much, along with actions. I mean, weakness is provocative. If you look at Israel right now, Israel's situation in the world, in addition to its enemies in Iran and Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon, it's now got a situation where a once friendly country, Egypt, is ruled by the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood president would gladly be joining Hamas in raining rockets down on Israel if it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid of losing aid and presiding over an economic collapse. You've got Turkey, which used to be a responsible country, now talking like Iran when it comes to the consequences that the price that Israel will pay for its actions. Israel has never been more alone. They need to know, and the world needs to know, that the United States stands with them. Now, the president so far has said that Israel has the right to defend itself, and that's so far so good. But the big test becomes, what happens if Israel if the rockets don't stop and Israel decides it has to do a ground offensive? Will the president back Israel? And will he stand with them and buy them the time they need to destroy the terrorist infrastructure that Hamas has in Gaza? That's the real test.
And what message are we sending if we don't speak out against countries like Turkey calling Israel terrorists? But I'm going to pick it up with Juan on that point right after the break.